In the last video, we created some crosses to add on top to the volumes and the lines we already have. In this video, we'll create some other volume element to compensate. So let's get started. Let's recycle some of the stuff we used before. So let's grab the, remember we had 2 boxes here. So let's just grab these and put it here. So the first step is, again, we're gonna create some of the points that we're gonna scatter the volume onto. So let's just change the offset a little bit, and possibly you might want to kind of change these as well, something like that to kind of compensate, something like that. Okay, and maybe turn on this just to kind of for a template. Okay. All right, something like this. And now let's only keep a few points. So let's do add, delete geometry. And then let's do a blast and only keep a few points here. Points, delete none selected. Turn on the numbers. Just pick the one you like. Let's see, 0, 4. You kind of want to avoid the ones in the middle because you don't really want it to cover, the volume boxes we did earlier. Okay, so let's just keep these for now, and you can always come back and tweak it. And then let's do a box here. Again, let's reuse some of the stuff we used earlier, such as this one. So this is the ID and the scale. So let's put it here. And, you want to go ahead and change some of the seed here so you can get different results. And now let's change the setup for these, the range for these as well. Okay, we're just gonna go for 0.7 for all of them as the minimum, and maximum is good. And then the overall minimum, let's keep it to 0.6. Okay, and then let's do copy to points. So we get something like this. Let's push the thing back a little bit because these are like secondary stuff. You don't want it to cover the main stuff, right? Let's just push this thing back somewhere like that. Okay, maybe something like this. Okay, and let's actually promote the ID to a primitive level. So from point to primitive, promote ID, so we can work on each box. So let's do for each that piece. Let's change this to ID. Okay. Let's put a null here. All right. So let's convert the box to a VDB. So VDB from polygon. And it doesn't have to be really that high res because we're just using it to scatter some points. Okay, and then let's do a scatter. And here we do force point count to 10,000, not too much. So you kind of want to preserve the ID from the original box. So let's do a point wrangle, and let's do ID goes to primitive. Primitive. the force input and ID. This. Now we need the first primitive. That's good enough. You don't have to specify the primitive number. Okay, and now we're gonna use a point VOP to do a point cloud here. So let's actually do another scatter. This time we're just gonna scatter to the surface of the box. So 10,000, that's fine. And we're gonna plug this to the point VOP. Let's go inside, drop a point cloud, open. So the file you're gonna use to find is the second input. Sorry, the fourth input. And P is current position, and let's promote the radius. Now let's just change the number of points to 3. You don't need that many. Angle 360. Okay. So here, let's do a point cloud number found. This is like a safety measure. So we just want to kind of compare. It's greater than 0. All right. And so if we could find a point using the point cloud, so let's do point cloud import by index here. There is an attribute called point dot distance. So you don't have to really import the first point you find, import the position, and then calculate the distance. You don't have to do that. You can just do point distance, and then it's just gonna calculate the distance of the 2 points for you already. All right. So let's fit that. The minimum is 0, and the maximum is the radius. Okay. And 0 to 1, that's fine. And let's put a ramp here. Ramp parameter. Let's just call it density ramp. Cameo ROM. And so we already have this compare here. So let's do a two-way switch. So basically, if you can find a point, then we're going to use the distance percentage compared to the radius as the density. And if we can't find anything, then we're not going to use this. If we can't find any points, then we're going to use 1 here. And then let's put a parameter. Density, use this to, actually when input is connected, invisible. Right. So what this does is some of the points in the center of the cube, they can't really find the any points on the shell because the radius, if you set the radius small enough, then the center, they can't find them. Then the density will be 1. And the points that are closer to the shell, it will have a fade off of density. So the volume you're going to get eventually is a lot more dense in the center and has a soft fade off on the edge. So that's the goal we're trying to achieve here. So let's go outside and take a look at, actually let's rename this. I'll call this PT Cloud ramp. And let's set the radius to something like 0.04, 0.4. Okay, and let's do something with the ramp. So here you want a value of 1. And then, again, we need Cameo ROM. smoother. Something like that. Okay, and if you want to see how it looks like eventually, you can drop a color node and do a ramp. Let's do a white to red gradient. Okay, so this is something you get. So we get a very soft fade off on the edge. And if you preview the whole thing, so this is what we get for all the cubes. You can grab that, and you can see this is what we get. So you probably noticed that some of the areas, like this corner here, it's probably gonna intersect with the volumes we had earlier. So what we're gonna do is let's actually use the original box. Let's go back to this box. Yeah. So let's just use a null to put it here. Okay. And let's do a transform. Again, you want to use the centroid. C, Y, C, Z. All right, so we want to scale this on Z direction. Probably even more. Or you can move this slightly. Something like that. Okay, now let's do a group. Points, insight points. Bounding region, enable bounding object. Okay, and then let's blast any of the points that falls inside. Inside. Okay, so these are the points that we got rid of. And then again, you want to do a fade off, just like we did before, because you can see that this is really, the density value is really high. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to grab the scatter, the ramp. Let's just copy that. And so here, let's do that. Okay. And then let's preview the. So one thing you do want to make sure is we're gonna actually. So what we need to is let's put a multiply there, because you already have a density on each point, right? So we can't use this to set. We have to multiply the whatever density values you have on top of it. So get attribute flow density. Okay, so let's put that in the first one, and the two-way. Let's put it in the second. Right. So with this and without it, you have this fade off. And now let's add more varieties to it. So let's do a point wrangle. Let's do a density multiply equals 2. Remember, we actually promoted the ID from each box to all the points inside. So we're gonna use that. So here you can do 5 or 10, because I think the value of the volume is not gonna be enough. So I'm gonna multiply a value on top. And then we're gonna do the same thing, bit 0 to 1. And inside we're gonna do random ptnum, and then multiply. Sorry, not ptnum. Ptnum, it's ID. And then we're just gonna multiply something like that. And then we're going to fit this to, let's say, something like that. Okay, and then let's preview. So you get something like this. Again, you can tweak the seed to get something you like. And now let's change the color a little bit. So let's put a point blob here. It's just when I do color mix, I like to use the blob instead. Let's go inside and just so there's already ID here. So let's just integer to flow, drop a multiply, add constant, just like the same thing. Do a seed, whatever you like, as long as it's big enough. Okay, and then just randomize it. Okay, let's do a color mix, and then color mix, and let's plug that into the bias, and let's promote the first and the second color, and then plug that into the color. Okay, and for the color, let's put something like the first one. Let's do something like again, like a very really bright blue color, and then the next one we're just gonna keep it as black. That's fine. And now if you want to see the result, let's do a VDB from particle. I like to do well, first of all, fog, and then voxel size to multiply this, and let's reduce the size of voxel. And because we already did a whole bunch of wrangle to the density and the colors, so you can turn this off actually. So we can let's plug this in first. So there's not going to be anything. So let's do density, and then we're going to use the density to create density. And then let's create second. Let me use the color. So here we're going to use the color to do a color one. And then the vector type is topo color UVW, that's fine. So if you want to see how it looks like, we can drop a volume visualization node here. And let's just density, let's do density, diffuse, let's do color. Now we have all the element for the text. In the next video, we'll take a look at how we can add an animated flickering effect to the whole thing. In the previous videos, we worked on how to create these elements for the text. And I spent some time to tweak the density, the noise, and all the settings to get something I like. And I set up all the preview node, and these can be used for the render as well. So we can kind of roughly see how it looks like in the viewport. But this is not 100% how we're gonna get in the render. So let's take a look at how we can render these out. Let's start by assigning materials. So the boxes, because they're volumes, so let's go to render, and here let's go to the shop network and just drop a let's drop a volume cloud node here, and let's actually set the color of this as well, because remember the box actually doesn't have any color in it. So let's do something like this. Okay, and Let's actually bump up the density to something like 10. We can adjust this later. And let's rename this to volume text box. Okay, let's go back. Here, let's plug that in. Shop. All right. And we don't really need to set the velocity blur here. So that's all we need to set up on the geometry level. Object level. And for the contour and the cross, these two, because they're points. So let's add a material for the points. So let's go to material. And let's actually go to window, material palette. And let's grab the constant shader here. So we don't really need to change anything. And here it says tint with point color. So it's just going to pick up whatever color we have on it. Let's just rename this to point, PT, constant. And then we can assign these material to it. I'll just dash shop material, point, constant. Okay, just copy that and then paste to the cross. And for the last one, the fog, let's go to shop again and just drop another volume cloud node. Here, let's just call it volume text fog. We don't need to change the color because there is color in it, so it's gonna pick it up. And let's just leave the density like this for now and see if we need to tweak it later. Let's go back and plug the material in it. Go to shop and fog. And now we need a camera here. So pick some view that you like and let's just control left mouse click on the camera. And let's lock the camera and zoom away to something you like. Okay, and let's name that to witness cam. So we kind of want to change the, okay, let's change the resolution to 1080p. And we can kind of keep these settings. All right. And now let's go to output, out, and let's add some mentor node here. So you can see that here I already did all the fetch node here. But basically, they're all under text 01, and then they're just gonna remove the fetch of the naming, and then you can just fetch the caching node. So let's do them one by one. Let's drop a mentor node. Mantra. Yes. Again, I like to name this hologram text 01 box. Let's color that. So let's look at these settings. First of all, you want to do render frame range, F start to F end. Okay. Images, output, it's fine. Extreme image planes. So if you want to do any kind of depth of field, you want to turn on the shading position or the shading depth, so you can get a P or a PZ AOVs, so you can actually do depth of field in Nuke or Houdini. And deep output, that's fine. These two we don't need to change. All right. So the rendering here, because the text, it doesn't really do much movement itself or relative to the camera, it doesn't do much. So we don't really need to change the motion blur. So the sampling, so it depends on what you're rendering. For example, the box is actually a volume. So the pixel sample, if you increase this, yeah, sometimes it will give you some sharper result, but you really don't need to go too high. So I just do 6. That's pretty good for any kind of volumes. This value usually helps the geometries, points, things like that. Okay, and these diffuse quality, volume quality, okay, we don't really need to change too much. And the limit, we can just do 1 for each because we're not really rendering refract or reflect. And for any kind of PBR rendering for geometries, you want to increase the diffuse limit. And for volumes like the box, we want to increase the volume limit to 1. Okay. And rendering. Okay, that's all for the rendering. And let's go to object. So let's get rid of the star here. And usually I do force object here, like just how we did the fashion node. So you want to let's just spring replace. Let's get rid of the so let's grab the up name first, and then let's replace the part says hologram, and then let's just replace it to nothing. So if you click on this, you can see that this is getting that. So what you can do is that if it's all volumes, just change the mentor name, and then it's just gonna grab the object for you. And the candidate light, it's fine. We don't really need to change anything. Script, driver. All right, that's all good. So let's go to render view, and let's just do a test render. Okay, so this is the result we have. It looks okay, so let's continue to add render node to the contour and everything. Okay, so let's just copy the box to a contour. And let's just rename that as a contour. Okay, so frame range, that's fine. So one thing I forgot to mention is I forgot to change the camera, actually. So you want to select that to the witness camera. And also the output path here, you want to kind of change it. So under the render folder, and then we want to put the operator's name under it. And you want version as well. And then let's get rid of this hip name because you don't want the file name under it. And then you can put version 001 here or not. Totally depend on your preference. Okay, so let's just copy the same setting to the contour. It's gonna read the name. Okay, let's take a look at the settings. There's not really much we need to change, actually, except that this is volume and this is points. So rendering, it's just a sampling. So here you might want to consider go to 9 or 12, which will give you sharper, cleaner results for geometries. And here the limits, that's fine. The volume limit, you can just put it back to 0 because we don't really have any volumes on it. Shading, render, thing. Okay. If the points are actually moving, you can turn on the motion blur, but for this case, not really. And the object, we got that. That's fine. All right. So let's just render this contour. All right. So this is what we get for the contours. And now we're gonna just spend some time to copy paste these node to cross and fog. So you just copy this to the fog and this one to the cross. And you don't really need to change anything. Everything is the same. So I'm going to pause it and copy paste these. So this is what we get for rendering the cross. Now let's render the fog. So this is what we get for the fog. At first look, it probably looks like it needs to be up-res on the edge, but let's see how it looks like in the comp later to decide if we actually need to increase this. Now we have all the element ready. There's one problem. All these elements are not time dependent. There's no animation on it, so it will look really static in the renders. So let's take a look at how we can add the flickering effect in the next video. In the last video, we set up the render node for all these elements. And in this video, we're gonna take a look at how we can add a flickering effect on it. So first of all, because we have multiple elements, so we can just come up with a setup for one node, and then we can just copy paste to everything. So they use the same noise pattern and everything, so it stays consistent. So first of all, let's add a density noise to this thing. Let's go under the VDD combine. And here, let's just drop a volume VOP. Let's just bypass that for now. Okay, so in this one, we're just gonna do a really simple, let's do a vector to float. So we get the P position. And then the noise, we want little streaks, so it's only going to use the X of the position. So let's do float to vector. I'll just get the X, and then let's put a anti-alias float noise, and then plug the position in, and promote the frequency, offset, amplitude, roughness. And let's do a fit range. -1 to +1, and then let's do a ramp parameter. Let's call this a noise ramp. All right. Now let's do a fit again. So 0 to 1, and then this will be the final density multiply we're going to use. So this here, let's call it minimum multiply. Label minimum multiply, and the maximum multiply. Max multiply. All right, and let's just put a multiply on top of the density. We just multiply that. Okay, so let's tweak the setting of these. Let's copy, paste the frequency, X. Well, it doesn't really matter, but let's put 30 for now. Okay, and then you kind of want the offset to, you want the noise to move, so it's constantly flickering. And in my personal experience, I like to put noise on the offset on the Y because it gets really, it's a lot cleaner that way. So let's put $sign FFF multiply 0.075 for now. And we're going to do play blast to test this speed. You probably have to increase this or reduce the speed later. You have to test this in play blast. So let's put the amplitude, roughness, that's fine. And let's put the noise ramp here. So let's see how this looks like. All right, so we get some lines. Maybe this is a bit too much. So let's reduce that to like 10. Okay, and then let's do almost up so that when you drag the ramp, it doesn't lag that much. Let's reduce the value to something like this. All right, and then the minimum, maybe you don't want it to be that obvious here. So let's go to maybe 0.67. The reason is oftentimes when this noise is moving, it's gonna look a lot more extreme. So you want to go subtle at the beginning and slightly increase it every time. Okay, so let's do a play blast. I'm gonna pause the record. So let's go to render flipbook with settings, and then we don't need to do that long. We can just do something like I would say 2 seconds would be good enough. So that would be 1049. All right, and then we don't want the resolution. Okay. So this is something that we have here. It looks good to me for now. It might look a little bit slow, but remember that we have some other animations later. So let's just keep this for now. So the next step is we're gonna recycle this and actually do like a offset on the Y position for all the elements. So first of all, let's rename this. Let's call this flicker volume VOP, because we're gonna have flicker point VOP later because we have some points that needs the same treatment, but they need to use point VOP instead. Okay, so there are 2 ways that we can offset the position of these little streaks up and down. The first method is you can use another volume VOP and use the volume sample, and under the position of volume sample, you just increase the position on the Y direction. And the second way is, remember we actually cache out the points before we convert it to VDBs. Let's actually put a point VOP here and we can offset the points directly. And I find that the second way is actually better because the first one, because we have this really sharp and clean shape, if you use a volume sample, it tends to mess up the result. So let's start by drop a point VOP. Actually, let's just point VOP here, and let's call it same thing here, flicker offset. Okay, and let's just copy paste the stuff we need here. Let's grab all these. Actually, we don't need the fit because we're not gonna use the minimum and maximum multiply. Okay, let's go to here, and we just put that in and plug the P here. All right, so here we can basically just go ahead and let's just copy all the attribute here. So I'm gonna pause the recording and just gonna copy paste all these and the ramp. All right, so I have all the parameters copy pasted, and now we can go inside and let's put a compare here. And let's promote the second value and just call this threshold. So the idea is if it's less or equal to this threshold, we are gonna offset the points. And then, so let's put another noise here, because if you just offset these, it looks very even. So let's put another anti-alias flow noise here. Let's just promote everything. And all we really need is, we just need the Y direction. So let's do vector to float. Actually, let's do a 3D one. Vector to float. And then let's do a fit range. -1 to 1. And then let's do a promote these two. So minimum offset, minimum offset, and then maximum offset. So we're going to actually make a vector and then add it on top of to the P. So let's do a float to vector again and plug this to Y. And you don't really need to put anything in X and Z. And let's just do a multiply. And then this goes in the first and the compare goes into this. Oh, sorry, multiply. This goes to the first, this goes to the second. And then we just do an add. Add. Okay, and then we just put P in there, and then this going in there, and then we just plug that into P. All right, so let's see what we need to change here. So first of all, let's change the threshold to something like 0.02. And then let's put the frequency. So copy, paste relative reference, paste relative reference. And we don't need to change the offset or anything. Amplitude 4.5. Let's see how it looks like. So I accidentally, if you go inside, I put the V on the wrong one. So it should be P. Okay, so we can see that this is definitely too much. So let's put maybe max offset to something like 0.06. And then let's put this into relative reference. And then maybe let's do a negative, so 0.6 multiply this. So it's something. And I feel like this is still a little bit too high for the threshold. Maybe you don't want this many. So let's just put for now. And the frequency, so if you look at these, the points are just too clean. It looks like the noise barely did anything. So let's just increase the frequency. All right, so this is something that we liked. And let's see, we convert this to a BDB, point VOP, all the good stuff. And also remember that because we did the BDB subtract, so you need the same thing for the Chinese character as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy, paste this thing, and then I'm gonna, because these values are already copy pasted, so we just need to copy paste all the values on the lower section here, all the frequency and everything. Okay, so I copy pasted all the values from right to the left side. And this is something that I have here. And now let's take a look at how it looks like in the render. So this is what I have in the final render. You can also do a play blast to view how this looks like. So the next step would be we'll copy paste all the nodes to the other features. After we apply the same noise to all the elements, the basic setup is ready. Now we can apply this to the other element, the other text. And that's what we're going to do for the next video. In the last video, we finished the basic setup for the text. Now let's apply this to another text. So let's just copy paste these nodes here. Copy and paste. All right. And let's just turn these display flag off for now. So let's go inside. I changed a few things. So if you take a look at the trace, you can see that the cop path, I changed this part. So it's going to grab the parent node, which is the text02. So it's going to So if you have a whole bunch of out node in the image network, it's just gonna grab the one automatically for you. And then I changed the naming to texture as well, because we're gonna have multiple image network. Okay, so let's take a look at this. All right, so this is just the character. And again, time shift, text. So let's go back and let's just turn on the contour and the cross, because these two are really fast. Okay, so let's go inside to texture 2, show all object. Okay, you can kind of see this in the center. Now let's put a transform node. So let's just put this thing down here, and let's make that bigger as well, something like that. All right, something like this. And we can just go ahead and run all these setup, and you want to change the geometry output as well. You might want to dump some of the assets. Some of them probably doesn't work. For example, the little box volume probably doesn't really work for this one, because this is so the stroke are so thin. And also the way we did this is we did a box outside, but this one you don't want any box, right? We just want the original look. And also there's one more thing that you want to change is if you go to the, let's turn on the grid. So remember that we actually, we wanted to copy this, but you see that this needs to be, go back to the origin before we can do a proper copy to points. So what you want to do is you want to put a transform node here. Sorry, transform. Okay, so let's put the translate XYZ there. So let's do negative centroid. Of input path. The first input. And then D underscore X. So this is gonna grab the centroid position and move it to the origin. And then you can copy paste. And you can see that this time, so the original text is here, okay? And then you can see that it's copy pasting it correctly. Well, this is because we had this transform here to move it. And you probably want to change the color to kind of compensate the overall blue tone. And also here you might want to tweak the resolution of the volume because the stroke is just too thin. So the original block size probably doesn't really work for that. And then after you're done, let's go up, and you want to change the name of these output node as well. Okay. So I spent some time adjusting the assets, and I decided to only just keep the contour and the cross, and I decided to drop the 2 volume element because I thought it was just a little bit too much. And these already have the materials assigned to it, so you don't really have to change anything. And if you go to the out here, you can just copy the node, the contour render node. So here you want to change the name as well. And I will just pick up the correct render object and all the settings and everything. Now we have all the elements of the text ready. We're going to move on to the fish and work on the look dev, rigging, and animation of it.